Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 7, Hindutva, VD Savarkar and MS Golwalkar. We start topic VD Savarkar on social reforms. Savarkar was a great supporter of social reforms and he exhorted the Hindus to accept modern practices based on science and reason and reject the religious superstitions and customs which were standing hindrance to the social progress. All the religious scriptures were man made and they were subject to scrutiny of reason. Due to blind faith in the scriptural authority, the Hindus became superstitious, fatalist, and credulous. This weakened their desire to know more. They neglected science and technology. Savarkar was a critic of caste system. He held that both Chaturvarna and caste system provided very disastrous for the unity of Hindu society. The Chaturvarna was based not on any scientific criteria but was a creation of scriptures and age old beliefs. It gave birth to inhuman practice of untouchability. The caste encouraged and institutionalized inequality, divided Hindu society into numerous compartments, and sowed the seeds of hostility and hatred among the Hindus. Historically, Hindu constantly faced defeats at the hands of the invaders because of the caste system. The untouchability was a distortion and it was wrong to consider any human being as untouchable. It militated against the spirit of human brotherhood. Hindus had developed several shackles that had been keeping them in chains, which were based on the principles of purity and impurity. Hindus enslaved women due to these wrong customs. Savarkar wanted the Hindus to reject blind faith in the Vedas and customs and tried to acquire material strength. They should accept the supremacy of machines and technology and break all bonds of blind faith and customs. It was incumbent upon Hindus to weed out all the defects in their society so that they could emerge as a strong nation in the world. For Savarkar, social reforms, rationalism, and science were needed for the development of a Hindu society, which would enable it to acquire the necessary strength. He said modern times nation was accepted as a viable unit for human beings. In the international politics, conflict and competition was raging between different nations of the world. In the international politics, language of strength was understood. Hence, Hindus should acquire strength through the pursuit of science and technology so that they could protect their national interest as well as self interest. Next point is Hindu nationalism of V.D. Savarkar. Savarkar was the first systematic exponent of the Hindu nationalism. He elaborately described his theory of Hindutva in his book Hindutva, published in 1924. By that time, he had abandoned his concept of Indian nationalism that he borrowed from the Joseph Mazzani in favor of Hindu nationalism. In the process of developing his concept of Hindu nationalism, he rejected some of the arguments of territorial nationalism. He held that the existence of a mere territory did not make nation, but nation was made by the people who constituted themselves as a political community, bound together by cultural affinities and traditions. The next point is Hindutva as cultural nationalism. Savarkar was a supporter of cultural nationalism. He was of the opinion that identity formation was the essence of nationalism. India had received such identity from the Hindu religion. This identity was evolved over a long period of time. Despite having outward differences, the Hindus were internally bound together by cultural, religious, social, and linguistic and historical affinities. These affinities were developed through the process of assimilation and association of the countless centuries. He molded the Hindus into a homogeneous and organic nation and, above all, induced a will to a common national life. This homogeneity was important because other sections in the society had divergent cultural traditions. Savarkar argued that it was cultural, racial, and religious unity that counted more in formation of the nation. While defining nation, Savarkar wrote that nation meant a political community which had occupied a contiguous and adequate territory and developed independent national identity. This community was internally organized and was bound together by cultural and racial affinities. He held that the Hindu had become nation because they possessed all these characteristics. Savarkar was of the opinion that the Hindu constituted nation because they had developed close affinities with the land bound by Himalayas to the Indian Ocean and the Indus River. Hindus considered India as their fatherland and holy land. Savarkar tried to show that those people constituted nation who considered India as fatherland and holy land. In this definition, Savarkar effectively excluded those people who did not consider India as their holy land because their sacred religious places were not situated in India. For him, Hindu nationalism stood for the unity of all Hindus. For him, Hindu society and not Hindu religion came first. Hindu were a nation because they were a self enclosed community which was internally organized on the basis of racial, religious, and linguistic affinities. The Hindus shared a common historical past. Savarkar knew that ultimately nationalism was a psychological feeling and it was necessary to cultivate national consciousness among the Hindus. The common affinities should be used to strengthen the national consciousness. He wanted Hindus to cultivate the affinities that encouraged national consciousness and undermine the tendencies that divided the Hindu societies. Next point is Hindu nation and Indian state. Savarkar wanted the Hindu nation to be strong and powerful so that India could survive as an independent, strong nation in the pernicious life struggle that was going on between different countries of the world. He held that in the modern times, nation had been recognized as the only viable political entity and all the societies of the world had been organized on the basis of nation. Hence, everybody had to think about his national policies in the context of national only. There was nothing parochial or sectarian about it. For Savarkar, Hindu as a community formed nation. Hence, he laid stress on the principle of exclusion. He excluded Muslims and Christians from the Indian nation because they did not consider India as a holy land, because their sacred religious places were situated outside India. Hence, he laid emphasis on the difference between Hindus and Muslims. Therefore, he wrote that everything that was common among us weakened our resolve to oppose them. Hindus were constantly fighting against non Hindus to save their community. Hence, he launched the Shuddhi movement to reconvert the converted Hindus to Hinduism and to purge Marathi language of Arabic and Persian words. The Muslims were not assimilated in India. In fact, they tried to absorb Hinduism, but they failed in their efforts. The prolonged resistance of the Hindus to Muslim invasions molded them into a strong and resolute nation. What were the rights and positions of minorities in such a Hindu nation? Savarkar held that nation was a cultural category, but state was a political category. All Hindus were the members of the nation. Non Hindus might not become members of the nation, but they were members of the Indian state. He maintained that Hindus did not advance any claims, privileges, and rights over and above non Hindu sanctions. He wrote, let in Indian state he purely Indian and let there be no distinction as far as franchise, public services, offices, and taxation on the ground of religion were concerned. Let all citizens of the Indian state be treated equally according to their individual worth, irrespective of their racial and religious percentage in the general population. He was ready to concede all rights to the minorities, but did not think it necessary to concede the demands of special interest advanced by Muslims. Thus, Savarkar made a distinction between the Indian state and Hindu nation and considered the Hindu nation as a part of the Indian state. Next point is Hindu nationalism of V.D. Savarkar, a critical study. Savarkar was the first Indian thinker who declared that Hindu formed a separate nation in India. He stood for a strong Hindu nation which would withstand and survive ferocious life struggle among the nations. He sought to popularize the Hindu nationalism throughout his life with the help of Hindu Mahasabha. There are obvious tensions and logical inconsistencies in the Hindu nationalism of B.D. Savarkar. He could not properly define the concept of nationalism because Hindus, Muslims, and Christians shared common traditions and affinities in India, even in the religious field. His advocacy of reason, science, and technology was instrumental in the sense that for him they were useful because they helped him forge a strong Hindu nation. Reason and science in the West were the culmination of the development of social philosophy, which fought against the religious prejudices and superstitions. The same could not be used to strengthen the cause of religious nationalism. From that point of view, the use of the word reason was deplorable because rationality speaking, the whole of communities could not be excluded from the definition of the nation on the ground of loyalty and patriotism because the betrayers of the national interest could come from any community. Also, his distinction between the nation and the state was not convincing because both of them, nation and state, could not be separated and they came together as nation state. He conceded all the citizenship rights to non Hindus except the membership of the nation. This would definitely create distinction among the popular people and destroy national unity. A large section of society would feel that they were excluded from the national mainstream for no fault of theirs. Savarkar's advocacy of the relativist ethics did not resolve these tensions because reason, science, and relativist ethics did not recognize ascriptive loyalties. They had to be applied to all human beings across the board. Now, the next point is the growth of Hindutva and the Rashtriya Swam Sevak Sangh RSS. The second school of Hindutva or Hindu nationalism was expounded by the leaders of the RSS. The RSS was established by Dr. Keshav Baliram Hedware in 1925 to protect the interest of the Hindus. Dr. Hedgewar was a follower of Lokmanya Tilak, and in his young days he had contacted with some armed revolutionaries of Calcutta. Hedgewar was close to the Dr. B.S. Munjee. In 1920-21, Dr. Hedgewar took part in the non-cooperation movement. After the suspension of the movement, the relations between the Hindus and the Muslims got deteriorated. Hedgewar thought that due to the disorganized nature of Hindu society, the Hindus were suffering losses in the communal rights. Hence, he decided to establish a strong organization of the Hindus to protect their interests. In 1925, he established the RSS. It was a cultural organization in the sense that it did not directly participate in politics. Dr. Heidegger set three objectives before the RSS, and they were as follows. First, mobilization of Hindus to protect their interest and to bring about unity and coherence in all their activities. Opposition to British militant and communal Muslim politics and the Congress, which had been following the policy of appeasement of Muslims. Third, increasing the influence of the RSS in all walks of life by patiently undertaking organizational work and by inculcating the spirit of patriotism. According to Dr. Heidegger, the basic purpose of the RSS was not to capture political power, but to increase the influence of Hindu in the public life of the country. During Dr. Heidegger's time, the RSS became popular among the white collar middle classes. It did not take part in the civil disobedience movement in 1930 and did not directly get involved in the political activities of the Hindu Mahasabha. In 1940s, Dr. Heidegger nominated a young university professor, Mr. Madhav Golwalkar, as the chief of the RSS. The RSS did not join the tumultuous Quit India movement of 1942. Golwalkar continued to occupy the position of the chief of the RSS up to 1973. It was M.S. Golwalkar who had studied ancient Indian philosophical texts and expounded the RSS concept of Hindu nationalism. He was an impressive personality. Throughout his life, Guruji, as he was called, was a great teacher and commanded unique respect and following. His enunciation of the Hindu nationalism became popular among the youth. Now we want to wind up this lecture and thank you so much for your attention.